Greetings everyone, this is Scott with Circworks Art Labs. Welcome to another issue of Making Comics 101. This is a bonus issue, bonus episode, whatever you want to call it, but every Wednesday I'd like to put out a bonus issue that kind of carries on what I talked about on the previous video that was released on Monday, and then of course on Friday I'll do a quick tip. So today what we're talking about this week is we are talking about paneling. So I wanted to show you some of my process for paneling, some tips, some of the tools I use and things like that. So that's what we're going to do, and today we're going to keep it pretty much traditional. I think maybe in the quick tip I might show you a little bit of how, some digital tricks for, creating panels. But today we're going to kind of keep everything traditional, because what you learn here can be applied very easily to, how you work digitally as well. So, so where should we begin? Let's see. Well, first off, I want to show you some different options and things that you can use for paneling. Now, of course, I mentioned this before on a previous episode, but I've released a number of these Make Your Own Comics books. I have some that have just sort of, smaller versions of like these page templates and everything. So I've got these here. These are just blank comic book panels. And the thing is with these, now there are some other ones on the market that I mentioned, and they're, they present theirs a little bit differently. Like, for instance, if you shrink this down, like, see these bold black lines? Now, typically when you're, the finished process of a comic book, you do want bold lines, but I wanted these to kind of serve as a guide. Also, so if you're drawing and say you want to break out of one of these panels, you can pencil that, and then you can go over it, in ink with your ruler. So you can kind of use these as guides, and you can kind of go through and then, darken these in or whatever. But mine are a little different. I wanted to keep them a little bit gray. I also have some that have, word balloons. So, if you just kind of want to get started and want sort of a guide, these are good for that. And then I have some that have sound effects. And also right now I don't have any with me. I'm waiting to get some, but I have also manga versions of these, which are a little bit smaller. They're a little more manga size, a little bit thicker though. And like the manga version with the sound effects actually has English on one side and then Japanese on the other, which is kind of cool. So that might be something you guys are interested in. These are available on Amazon.com. So that's one of the tools that you can use for paneling, is just these predefined panels. They're already there for you. Now, obviously that's not always gonna work for you, because sometimes in writing your stories, you've got to create your own panels. So that's what we're going to get into. Now, also, in addition to the Make Your Own Comics books, I have you probably heard me talk about this, but the Comic Maker Starter Kit, which is free. It's available to download on my website at circworks.com, and they come with these. Now, it's a digital product, so all these different digital files, but I have all these panels. As you can see, you've got the little label on here in blue line, so it's reproduced. That's not going to show up, but you can print these out. Now, this is 11 by 17 cardstock that I've just run through a large format printer and printed these out that you can use as guides, but these are all free, available. Now, there's also the Comic Maker Toolkit, which is sort of a deluxe version that has a lot more, and definitely has a lot more panels than what you get with the starter kit, but that's why it's called a starter kit. It's great to get you started, and then once you kind of move up and you need other stuff, there's that. So hopefully that's enough of me pitching my own stuff. Oh, one other thing. So yeah, and also these just page guides. These are available. You can buy pre-ruled pages, from Michaels or whatever. These ones are mine from the Comic Maker Toolkit and Starter Kit that you can print out and use these as guides. That's what we're going to use. So I printed these on 11 by 17 cardstock. And yeah, so let's kind of get into it. I want to show you some of my tools and some of the things that I use for laying out comic book panels. Of course, you need a ruler, but don't pay too much attention to this ruler because I'm going to show you a way better option that's really cool. I've got my comic book, layout. Now you don't necessarily need this, but this is gonna help you out because if you can see here, you've got all these little guides here, that are there to help you as far as laying out your panels. So you don't have to do as much measuring and everything. I mean, certainly you can take your ruler and you can, go through and you can, mark off, say 4 inches down here, 4 inches down here, and then you can draw a line. If you didn't have these guides, you could draw a line across, but we've got these guides, so you can just put your ruler up here and draw your line based on where these guides line up. Now, obviously, these aren't meant to say this is where you need to put your panels. These are just guides. So even if I'm moving up a little bit away from these, I can still get a pretty good idea. I can eyeball it and say, okay, these line up. Now, if there weren't any of these guides, sometimes, for instance, if I was to flip this over and just a blank page, if you're going off of this without guides, you could maybe make a close approximation if this is lined up properly, but you're probably gonna find that you're off a little bit. So that's the good thing about having, a template with these guides here for you. Now I've got the script that I did for what we're currently calling Wild Thing, even though I found out that there was a movie that has some similarities from the 80s, but this isn't like a real project. This is just one that I'm using to sort of as a demonstration. So I'm gonna kind of go off of that, and we've got 3 panels on this page. So the first one is an establishing shot. It says panel 1, bird's eye view. We look upon a large metropolitan city, dilapidated and overrun with plant life. Okay, so we know this is an establishing shot. And also, you want to look ahead you don't want to just read panel by panel and just draw the panel, because obviously you want to know how many panels, especially if you're not writing this yourself, you want to know how many panels, and you want to think about that when you're laying out what's the number of panels we have and how are we best going to fit these on a page. So I've already kind of considered that. So I want my first panel, it's like we said, it's an establishing shot. So I want that first panel to, I don't want it to take up a lot of space. I want to show this cityscape, this dilapidated cityscape, but I know in the second panel that I'm going to do, I want that to be pretty big. So I don't want to take up a lot of room with the establishing shot, and you don't always need to. I mean, it can be fairly thin, and you just look at it at a glance and like, oh, I can see where we are. So I'm not going to take up much space with this first panel. Now, I mentioned I have this ruler, but this is, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before or not, but this is a mapping ruler, and this is like one of my favorite tools. It's just awesome, and of course there are links to the tools that I use in the description, and also if you go to my website at circworks.com, there is a section that says tools where you can go and you can download this stuff. There are Amazon affiliate links, so it doesn't cost you any extra, but if you order from there, then I get a little, a few cents or whatever. Amazon will do that for me. But anyway, but this is it's a mapping ruler, or a parallel glider it's called, I guess. But it's awesome because, and this is the one that I would recommend, this Alvin one. And there's probably other ones that are good, but I have in the past bought cheaper ones. This one has got, it's plastic here, but this is metal. And it rolls really good. I would not buy the cheaper ones, because what I found with some of the cheaper ones, the ones that are all plastic, is that sometimes they'll kind of shift. And the whole idea of this is because you want straight lines. So with this, once I set this down, I'm gonna line it up with this dotted line up here. I don't know if you can see that. So once I get it to where I want, then I can just roll it down, and it's gonna stay perfectly parallel. That's why it's called a parallel glider. So now I'm kind of twisting this thing. It is not twisting. Now with the cheaper ones, sometimes they will. So and these aren't super. I mean, this is an awesome investment. I don't remember how much I paid for this, but it was well worth the money. But the great thing about this, you can't see what I have going on here as far as this table setup, but I am working in a relatively small space. This isn't my actual, the actual art desk. So where the art desk, back in the days, we had these these, parallel rulers that were, but you could still purchase these, and it's also a good investment. But it's basically on these. There's these little lines, these little wires, and the ruler just kind of, or the straight edge just kind of goes and follows those, those wires, and it doesn't, but you can't. You need. The good thing about this is you don't even necessarily need a triangle. Now, if, for instance, say I had a typical ruler. I don't have any triangles with me, but basically, or a T-square or whatever. If I've got that set up and then I want to do a line up, this way, if I want more of a vertical line, then I have to set the triangle on here, and then that'll create an area, a guide for me to draw more vertical lines. But with this, I don't need that. I just flip it. So, whereas when you've got the rulers that are not stationary, but they're attached to your desk, and you kind of move, or straight edge. And I guess you could take a straight edge or a T-square, and then kind of flip it that way too. But just with the space of your desk, it doesn't always work. But this is great. It's it's not super big, and if you're working with larger areas, and this isn't large enough, you can just put a larger ruler over it and just use that, and then kind of go off of here. So pretty cool. All right. So, but like I said, this is just an amazing tool. I uninstalled. That sounds more like computer talk. But I took down my original parallel rulers from my desk because they would kind of got in the way and everything with the wires and stuff like that. So I don't even use that. I just use this. So, and this is a lot cheaper than a setup like that. But so anyway, enough of that. But I just want to really champion the idea of getting one of these mapping rulers, parallel gliders, whatever, because they're just amazing. So anyway, okay, so I got it lined up here. And I'm also, again, I'm paying attention to these lines and everything here, so I don't even need to use the actual ruler. Now you can, obviously. And another thing, this is very important that I almost forgot to mention. I don't know if you can see these smudges here. That is because you want to keep your, whatever rulers you're using, you want to keep them clean, whether you use Windex or whatever, especially if you're inking, because the ink will stay on there, and then what'll happen, you'll get these smudging and stuff like this. I'm not really too concerned with that right now, but I probably should have cleaned this ruler before I started to do this. But that's something you definitely want to do, especially if you're working on your actual page. This is just me doing an example, so that's not as important. But you don't want to get these smudges and everything on your page. So make sure you have a clean ruler. But what I was saying before I noticed those smudges, is that, we can obviously use the ruler on here and mark these accordingly to where we want, but we're trying to make it as simple as possible, and we can just use these rulers as guides. So once I got it lined up to this top line, like I said, it's not going to shift at all. So I'm just going to draw my first. Now this is not a non-photo blue pencil. This is more of just a regular blue Col-Erase pencil. It probably won't pick up. It's close enough, but I want it to be just a little bit darker so you guys can see, because typically typically my lines aren't, super dark. So, all right, so I'm just gonna roll this down here, and let's see, how about right about there, all right? So we've got that, and there we go. And like I said, now we just flip that over this way. I'm gonna draw my line here. And especially if you're working with non-photo blue, I don't really always worry about going a little bit over. Now I flipped over here, but I didn't. I could have just went like this. I could have just drug it over. Now once I'm getting off the page, then it kind of did shift a little bit because I'm on a different surface. So that's why I kind of flipped it over here. I'm gonna line that up. Go here. Draw my line. Now, like I said, if I went a little bit over, that's okay, because it's not going to photograph. So that's basically, the first panel. Now, this is a question that I've got this is something that I usually just eyeball. I usually eyeball the space between panels. There's not a set, there's not any particular distance that should be between panels. Sometimes that can be with your storytelling, as we mentioned in the other episode. Like for instance, if you can put a larger gap if you want to use that negative space to help your storytelling. But typically what I do, I usually go, and again, I eyeball it, but I found that with this, when I'm working at 11 by 17, which is not the actual printed size, I usually work larger. But if you're working at a larger size, I find that 1/8 of an inch, more or less, is a good distance between panel when you're working at a larger size. Obviously, if you're going to work at actual size, that's going to be pretty big. So, but 1/8 of an inch, more or less, I think is a good distance when you're working at this 11 by 17. Now, of course, again, I'm talking inches. So, if you're not in the States or anywhere else in the world that uses the metric system, that's probably not gonna mean anything. But you can do what I do when I try to figure out what everyone else uses as far as measurement, and just go on Google and do a conversion. So, but I don't know what that is right off the bat. So anyway, so that's the space that I'm using. And now, like I said, I'm gonna move this up so you guys can see a little bit. And I'm going to create my second panel. Like I said, I want this to be a fairly large panel. Now, again, I'm paying attention to these little guides here. I don't want it to be, it could be right on this guide, but I want to go a little bit lower. Let's see, I wasn't lining that up properly. You always want to make sure you line it up right to begin with. All right, and then, so I'm going to draw my line right here. I'll just flip this ruler over, line it up. And then, like I said, I can go here. We probably do that. Yeah. Draw my line here. Again. So there we go. Larger panel. And then I'm gonna line this up again. Now, I've been kind of switching around, moving from vertical to horizontal, but if you want to save some time, basically you can go and bump, do all your horizontal lines first, and then go back and do all your vertical lines. That can save some time. But it's kind of up to you, however you want to do it. So again, I'm just going to eyeball this. I'm looking up at the other part that's off screen, so you can't see it, but I kind of got an idea that's about 1/8 of an inch. Do that, and again, then I'll just go off here. Now I'm getting off my page, so I've got to kind of resituate. You want to give yourself plenty of space, but I'm trying to keep everything in the camera, so that's a little harder to do. And then there we go, and then flip that over. There we go. There you go. But that's a pretty awesome tool. That's the main. If you take anything away from this video, that's the main thing I'm trying to get you to do. Is if you're going to be doing traditional comics, get one of these parallel gliders, mapping rulers. All right. So another quick thing as far as the inking. Now, I usually wouldn't ink these panels until after I've penciled it, because sometimes things can change, or if you've got, like I said, if you want something to break a border, I would pencil everything, but just because this isn't a penciling episode, I'm just gonna go ahead and show you, just talk real quickly about just inking the panel. And this isn't anything crazy or anything revolutionary, but I'm pretty sure you can figure out to do it without me explaining it. But a couple things. Sometimes people ask as far as the width of when you're inking, how thick your panel should be. I don't think there's any set rule. I typically use a Micron 0.8. And I find that works pretty well for me. In the past, sometimes I have done thicker panels. I don't know if I would go any thinner than a number 8 micron, because then it gets to the point where they don't show up very well. So you want a fairly thick line, and the Micron number 8, as far as the the ones that are easy to find. That's it. So you can see kind of the thickness there. Now I went over that back and forth a few times. I just do that to be safe because this Micron isn't so fresh. But there you go. And again, there is I think there is there a little thing here? The only thing that, you know, and okay, yeah, so it is raised a little bit because, you know, what'll happen is when you're ruling out your pages, sometimes what you want to do is you want to put some masking tape on here and kind of bump that up, because if it doesn't have a little bit of a beveled edge, it can smudge. I haven't really experienced that with this. I mean, it's kind of what it's for. I mean, where this ruler is pretty much, I mean, I guess it's for using as a straight edge, especially because it's metal. And the other, and this doesn't really have to do with comics or anything, but the problem with plastic rulers, and again, this is plastic, which it needs to be so you can kind of see, is that if you never use an X-Acto knife over this. So for whatever reason, and again, if you're cutting your pages, don't use this ruler. Use a metal ruler for cutting your pages out, unless you've got like a paper cutter or whatever. But if you're using an X-Acto blade, don't use these plastic ones, because it will cut right through that plastic. But anyway, so let's just do that again. I'm not going to do all of these, because once you see, and this is the point where you want to make sure that you're not going over as far as, you know, crossing those lines. You want those to line up. But that's why the penciling is a good guide for that. There you go. And that, you know, that number 8 micron, it's a pretty good size. So yeah. Just a quick side note on Sharpies. I've talked about this before. A lot of people use Sharpies, and I'm not talking about the big fat Sharpies. Those are, you know, pretty thick. I mean, you can use those, and I've seen people use those. The only thing about Sharpies is that they're not light fast. So, you know, like a Micron or whatever, this is basically like an India ink that's permanent. Well, I mean, I have to take that back, because Sharpie ink is permanent, but it's not light fast, which means it will fade over time. So if you just want to get your comics out there and printed, and after that you don't care about the original art or anything, I guess you could use Sharpies. But if you want your stuff to last and not fade and not discolor, I wouldn't use Sharpies for that. So anyway, so that's pretty much going to do it for paneling. There's a lot more I can talk about, but the main thing I just wanted to do was talk about the benefits of using one of these mapping rulers, and just show you some tips and some of the other products, the stuff that either I make, or that you can, you know, make on your own, or whatever. You can use whatever you like, but that's just a little insight into paneling. So that's going to do it for today. Like I said, on Friday I will probably show you just a really brief, because we do our quick tip on Friday. So just quick, you know, probably maybe in Clip Studio Paint, I'll show you some of the cool tips and things you can use for laying out your panels digitally in that program, because that's an awesome program for doing comics, and one that I use all the time. So yeah, that's going to do it for another issue of Making Comics 101, and I will see you guys later. That is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at CircWorks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. Do you like making comics? Then go to CircWorks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.